One thing I am grateful for about my home, in as much as it was chaotic in many, many ways. I mean, seeing my parents fight, argue from, I don't know, 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. in the morning, seeing them bundle each other on the walls, sometimes holding knives, and, my dad pulling my mom's hair, to many other crazy things. Those things, for sure, they damaged me in ways that took, I think, about 20 years to really understand the extent of the damage and the trauma. Uh, my my parents were religious people, mostly in the beginning. When I was younger, my mom was Anglican, my dad was Catholic. My mom converted into Catholicism, uh, and then the home became Catholic. My dad's side of the family was Catholic. My mom's side of the family, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure because grandma, my mom's mom was Catholic, still is Catholic. And then I don't know what denomination my maternal grandpa was before he converted to being a Jehovah Witness. The rest of my maternal uncles and aunties, I have no idea. They weren't, like, religion wasn't so pronounced on my mom's side of the family. On my dad's side of the family, I mean, it wasn't extreme, even though they were Catholics, but it wasn't that extreme thing. So grandma from my dad's side would definitely go to church every Sunday. I never saw her pray the rosary, but she always had a rosary on her neck. And they'd go to these jumuiyas that the people go, the Catholics go, the community forums or gatherings or meetings after church, and that was all. That's the much that I saw. In our home, it was pretty similar. We'd go to church every Sunday in the morning, come back home, and then my mom would leave for a jumuiya. I don't know where my dad ever went to on Sunday afternoons. But then the thing I was saying I'm grateful for was they were never, my parents were never extremists. You see, uh, much as they were religious people, religion was never used against you at home. It was never weaponized against you at home. Yes, it was a requirement to go to church. Yes, you had to behave in godly ways, but then it was never, if there were no ultimatums about behavior at home and religion. Like, those things never connected, like interconnected much at home. But then later on, my dad stopped going to church, and my mom became even more religious. And so at some points, she would, quote unquote, want us, not in a way that we had a choice, to recite the rosary with her at home, me and my siblings. Of course, my dad was never there. So having to recite Hail Mary 40 fucking times every night. I'd rather forget it. It was not fun at all. You were just a child, you're tired, you had a long day. Prayer is the least thing you need at that time. You just want to sleep. But then we try sometimes. I can't say it did anything for me, really, but I appreciate my mother's efforts to keep her family together, to try to have us give us some kind of fundamentals that we definitely needed in life, you see. Now, in regards to sexuality, of course, like I've said before, we never talked about sex at home. And I remember in 2015, I was what, 27? My mom came home and she told me, so the Catholic Church had a hospital near our home, and she was like, these guys have an offer for circumcision, so you have to go and check how much they are charging, and then you need to go. But then I wasn't interested in circumcision. I wasn't really interested in it. I think my brother did go, and the cousin we lived with also went, but it didn't make sense to me. And sometimes I'm grateful that I didn't go, because I just like my phallus to be the way it is, and it gives me good pleasure. Yeah. We never discussed sexuality too much. There was never any kind of sex education at home either. So I kind of had to figure things by myself, well, through porn, sometimes movies. There were never books really. And much of my socializations around sexuality happened outside our home, in the things I was reading, the things I was seeing in the news and whatever. So, of course, one of the hard things we grew up knowing was that abortion was illegal, it was a sin, it was murder. And I remember having very strong points about that early on in my life. I think maybe from around 20, maybe 9 or 17 years going up to around 26 thereabout, I had really strong opinions about abortion, because I was a religious person as well. I was a staunch Christian. Well, maybe not staunch in the sense that I looked down upon non-believers, but I was pretty much in. So yeah, and after a while, I got into activism somehow. I think I've always been in activism, but then I've also been growing as a person over the years. And then the more you learn, the more you know that, oh wow, this is not what I thought it was. So for abortion, again, I grew out of that after realizing that I knew nothing about reproductive health. I knew nothing about women's bodies, really, what that is like, the many, many circumstances with which women get pregnant and they do not want to keep the babies. Um, and it's supposed to be a valid thing. It's not too complicated. It's just that we've given religious meaning to giving birth, and assigned that meaning to women. And the patriarchy wants to ensure that women configure to the place with which it has given them in society, in culture. And so when a woman says, no, that's not what I want with my body, then she's reminded of where she belongs, which is rather unfortunate, you know? And it is very similar again for homosexuality. There's been very big debate over the years about, was this thing African? Has it been here before? We do not have any recollection or stories to hear, or um, memories or documentation that homosexuality existed in Africa. And previously as well, when I was more religious, I mean, it wasn't such a big deal, but then I had some kind of homophobia. I used to wonder, like, oh, what's gonna happen to our world if now homosexuality is legalized, and then now we will be having even billboards where gay people are showcasing their things and stuff like that. I mean, most of it was just fear, you know. And of course, it is this fear that informs policy, and it informs behavior and violence as well on a much higher level. Um, but then I also outgrew that after realizing that it really doesn't matter what I feel about homosexuality. It really doesn't. That people are always going to be people, and I am always going to be me. The same way I do not want to be regulated or my freedoms to be uh, said out loud for me, and controlled for that matter. That's the same way everybody else out there wants their life to be, as long as they're not harming anybody. Uh, I remember listening to Ngugi wa Thiong'o speaking to a journalist. I think this was in the 80s. And Ngugi said something so beautiful and deep at the same time. He said, one of the greatest weapons that the white man used successfully against us was to erase our memories of who we were before they got here. You see, our cultures, our songs, our medicine people, our healers, our witches, um, our nuances, like just so many things were erased, and then they were replaced by this new ideology of a Christian God who um, was the only true God, and you had to worship him, and it was a him as well. You see, and no other God was to be worshipped other than him. He took the shape of a man. God took the shape of a man, and that changed so many things. Because back in the day, the Meru people worshipped their way. The Gikuyu worshipped in their own way. The Luo worshipped in their own way. The Maasai worshipped in their own way. And people had no issues with that, with how they worshipped, and how other people worshipped. We had no issues with that. I think we understood as communities that everybody has their thing going on and we respect it. Then here comes colonialism and quote unquote Christian salvation. And it tells you, no, fam, all of you need to be the same. There's only one God, and your gods are false and they're demonic, and all these cultural practices you have are bad. So you have to stop them for you to go to heaven. You know, so kill your stories about the afterlife, kill your stories about the myths you have about life after death, kill all those things, and now believe in the rapture, believe in the second coming of Jesus Christ, believe in heaven and hell, believe in all that shit. Now, having looked at how that white supremacist heteropatriarchal system wanted to define and control sex, it's the same thing that gave birth to homophobia, you know, because from the simple fact that we stopped looking at or appreciating each other's differences and looking at it as beauty, we started saying, oh, everybody needs to be the same for them to be right. And that's how being straight is now looked at. If you're not straight, you are an other. And I often also think that word straight is violent, because straight means upright, straight means correct. And so if you're not that, then it means you are not correct, you're crooked. You can't look at people like that. You can't view people like that. You see, people are just people. See, people are just people. Um, there are people who are going to love men, love women, love everybody else in between who is queer, who is the way they are. And perhaps this attachment to sameness is one of the deepest colonial legacies that continue to grapple our psyche as a people all over the world, actually. And the fact that whiteness has become the center of rightness. You see, it's really dangerous. It's been chaotic for most parts in the last maybe 500 years or so. So, amongst the countries that exist in the world today, there are so many British colonies that still demonize homosexuality. In Africa and in other places in the world, when the British left here in this is Kenya, 1963, well, quote unquote, left. It was like 56, 7, 8, 9, 60, 1, 2, 3. It was just 7 years after they had legalized homosexuality in the UK, which was in 1956. Many Kenyans don't know that. We don't know that. Um, and for me, it's actually interesting that somebody came up with a law to illegalize people connecting and out of consent. Like, they illegalized that, they criminalized that, you know, they because they had not thought of it as something natural, and that's the other thing about what we know rightness to be. When white supremacy does not think something is right, then it stops being right. And it controls what is right and what is wrong. It controls what is good and what is bad. It controls how heaven looks like and how hell looks like, for everybody. So we are all subjected to very narrow lenses of looking at life. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day. They are Christian and they were very curious about this homosexuality conversation. And we just had an open conversation because they were replying to a video of me I had put out. I was just wearing my boxer and dancing with my ornaments and all that. And he was like, "Why do you post videos of you naked?" And I told him, because I'm free. I just do my thing, you know. And he was like, "Are we supposed to grow to be this free?" And I told him, "Yeah, like, why would you want to grow to become otherwise?" There's a lot of shame associated with showing our bodies, and yet in the early 1900s, we have images of Africans just walking about with hides and skins, and nakedness was not frowned upon like that. Like, we were just living our lives, and that was forcefully taken out of us. It was forcefully. We didn't evolve to start associating with these clothes. It was forcefully taken out of us because everything that was ours was demonized. And that came along with religion, actually, as well. And so he said, "I want to ask you something, and I need you to be honest about it. Like, what are your open ideas about homosexuality?" Because many times, actually, me just dancing around with my boxer is, because I shake my ass a lot, is attributed to the fact that I must be gay, which I don't mind really, because people will always have ideas about who I am, what I can do as a heterosexual man, or just as a man. They always have ideas about who I'm supposed to be, the parameters with which I can live within society. And I told him that we are in control of our bodies, and we do not, it doesn't matter what I think about homosexuality, because it is not upon me to decide who deserves life and who does not, who deserves to desire this way. I cannot control desire for anybody, and neither can you, neither can any of us. you know we are nature. Human beings are nature. I think many times we almost think of ourselves as apart from nature, but we are nature. We were born in the wild. Before we ever thought of caves that morphed to become houses, we were born in the wild. We are of the wild. It just so happens that our brains are the most developed in the animal species that exist in the world, you see. And so after developing institutions and governments to quote unquote control each other, or one group to control another, we started having these laws and these ideas that people came up with to try to see how how others can live together. But then we miss out on so much, because you cannot centralize desire, you cannot centralize culture, you cannot centralize existence. That's not upon you. It's none of your business. You know what I mean? So just the same way nature exists within spectrums, mountains are different. If you go to any natural forest, trees that exist in a natural forest are of different species, they're of different sizes, they are different habitats for different organisms. And all sorts of natural things on earth exist within variations, and human beings are not different. Like, this thing is not even that deep. It is only natural that you're going to have people who edge on the scale of totally masculine, and then this other scale of totally feminine, and then you're going to have everybody else in between. In fact, at the middle where intersex people are, we have more than 30 variations of intersex people. You see, these are things we are not even taught, you know. And in between all that, in between this spectrum, you're gonna have people who love only having one lover because that's what works for them. There are others who will want more than one lover because that's what works for them, whether they are men, women, or queer people, or whatever. You're gonna have people, men who romantically love men. You're gonna have women who romantically love women. You're gonna have people who have a mixture of both, like, and a mixture of everything else. Maybe you're gonna have a guy who sometimes, like, maybe they're bi, maybe they're beyond bi. Like, it's never a matter of how I define it for another person, because what somebody feels as desire deep within them is not something they created by themselves. Like, it's just there. Nobody told me to love women, it just happened. And especially when I got to 12 years old, I just started having those feelings that, oh my gosh, I love Waidera, I like Waidera. And there's this energy that I just like around women, that women give me. When I'm around them, there's a thing I feel. I don't feel the same around men. It's just not there. And I also have intimate connections with men. They are just not erotic. They are emotional, and there's something I also feel that is deep when I am intimating with men emotionally that I don't feel when I'm intimating with women or queer people or anybody else. So the connections are different. But when it comes to sex, I feel attracted to women. That's not something that I created by myself. It just happened to me. And so we need to stop beating about whether homosexuality should be legal or not, whether it's right or not, whether it's godly or evil or all that stuff. Like, we have to start appreciating that humans exist in a spectrum. Now, because we do not have recollections of whether we had queer people in Africa for that matter, we need to raise our intelligence a little bit to bring ourselves to this moment and appreciate the fact that whether we have that recollection or not, these people are here. They're here with us. And it's a matter of appreciating and accepting that we are not the ones in control of how people present themselves. People are always going to be who they are, you know, because this insistence of a heteronormative world where we are saying, or which means that only men and women deserve to come together like that to form what we call families or relationships, is incredibly violent and exclusive, because there are so many people who don't feel like they fit into that system, and they do not want to fight anybody. They do not want to demonize any other person. They equally want to be seen in media. They equally want to be accepted in religion or church or Islam or Hindu or wherever they are. They equally want to be, or actually, they equally have the rights to have a quality education, quality healthcare. They deserve friends. They deserve stable relationships that are good for them, pleasurable for them. They are human. It actually ends there. They are human. We need to stop thinking that being straight, quote unquote, again, keeps you above everybody else. We need to stop having that idea that being heterosexual keeps you above everybody else. You're just living in a spectrum, and it's a horizontal spectrum. You know what I mean? So these are conversations we need to start having early on in our lives with our kids. But then those attitudes have to first change individually. The revolution, before it is collective, it has to be individual, right? So some points to think about there. Drop your comments on the comment section. I'd love to hear your reflections about this. And let's keep talking. Subscribe to the channel. Follow us on Spotify as well, and any other your favorite podcast platform. We have sex stories that come out every single Friday, and they're really, really, really yummy. Nothing underneath podcast. That's what you need to look for. Thank you again for being with me through the time I started this out. Like, I really enjoy talking about sex and reproductive health, for that matter. I love listening to sex stories. I love talking about the politics around sex and reproductive health. And I just think that for the people who are here today and the people who are coming after us, they need to get a better world where they are not going to be shamed for having questions. and for expressing who they really are in their authenticity. All right. My name is Rix or Onyango Otieno. See you next time.